Well, welcome. I think we're ready to go. Dr. Lundgren's ready to go, I think. Welcome to those attending. And for those of you who will otherwise also see it maybe at a later date when you watch the recording. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Lundgren here. Many of you probably know her. She's well known in Mankato. She is the daughter of the famous and well-loved professor and artist, Bill Bukowski. She does work with Christian Family Solutions. She is an adjunct professor. Are you an adjunct professor, Dr. Lundgren? Is that the technical term over at MSU, working in both the bachelor's and the master's?
I'm a full-time
professor. They should update those things for me. And which she oversees the LADC program, which I never want to lose a student at Bethany. The only one or two I've ever been happy that they've left us and went over to MSU is because they went to that program. And I, because of my work, really, truly, strongly believe in the work that's being done there and in that program. As a professor, she has almost a near perfect rating on Rate Your Professor, RateMyProfessor.com. It's a 4.8 out of 5 stars, which is pretty awesome, Dr. Lundgren. She has been a guest recently on the podcast, The Well Mind, with Dr. Coles here, who's at Bethany. And it's my understanding, after a meeting I was able to have with another college last week, Friday, she recently gave a similar presentation over in New Ulm at Martin Luther College. I believe that was also done in a similar format like what you're all seeing right now. The reviews over there, because MLC did it, Martin Luther College did it in a way where it was piped, I think, into classes and classrooms for them to do. The vice president of student affairs over there and his right-hand people all said very positive things from the student body, even not just from the faculty staff, but the student body was very vocal on the positive things that they pulled out from the presentation. And so with all of that being said by me, I'm going to shut up once, which is hard for a preacher. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lundgren. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored and grateful to be able to have this opportunity. The content that I'm going to share is so near and dear to my heart, and it has impacted me so much professionally and so much personally that I'm just excited to share it with you today. So as Dean Schmidt said, my name is Dr. Jennifer Lundgren. You can call me Jenna. I make my students call me Dr. Lundgren just because I look like I'm 20. So I do keep that boundary with them. But I will tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk about this topic, and then I'm just going to kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. I really want to talk about things that are happening right now that put us at risk for mental health issues, and then very concrete strategies that you can use to do something about it, to reframe it, to think about it differently, and to really take control of your mental health and your emotional health. So what I'm not going to tell you to do is do more or do yoga or do the whole 30. This is more about really simple perspective changes and mindset changes that can make all the difference in the world. All right, so again, as Dean Schmidt said, I'm a professor at MSU in Mankato. I'm a Bethany alum. I was a psych major there, and then I just went to college for like 6 more years, and I got my doctorate right away. And I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a mental health clinician. So my big passion is supporting people who serve others. So I work personally as a clinician. I work with a lot of teachers and a lot of called workers, a lot of parents. And then what I do at MSU is I actually teach people how to become counselors. So my relationship with this topic really started when I started to see that my students were getting really burned out. They didn't have really good ways to take care of themselves. And especially if you are a counselor, if you serve others, if you work in any sort of profession that's mentally or emotionally taxing, it's so important to have these strategies that can really fill up your own cup and keep you vital and keep you positive, and just really keep you thriving, especially in externally stressful circumstances. And then, so I did all this research and I dove into the empirical literature and the self-help research, and then COVID hit. So it's like this topic has become so much more important now. And from there, I've been consulting with a lot of different companies and presenting on this topic quite a bit. So I'm really going to talk about kind of things that put us at risk right now, and then what we can do about it. All right, and I'm not going to talk about this too much because I think you all feel this and you know this and you know what's wrong. This is one of the most stressful times, just this insanely stressful environment that we live at all of these different levels, at a macro, political, societal level, kind of at a community, family perhaps, and then just kind of trickling down to a personal, internal, kind of affective, how we feel inside state. It's just all of these curveballs at all of these different levels. So I think kind of at the core of it, and for us as humans, our basic need above anything else is to be safe in relationships, to be safe physically. And what this pandemic has really done, it has threatened that safety. And part of being well and being happy and being connected is having strong relationships with people. In all of the happiness literature, in the addiction literature, healthy relationships are at the core of what makes us well. And what's so hard about this pandemic is that relationships and people are the ones that are causing these feelings of unsafety, of being around people. These words like being exposed and contaminated, that being around people triggers this fight or flight and threat response in us. So at the core, we feel unsafe. And I think, historically, when we've struggled as a country, what we've always done is that we rally together, right? We protest, we sing, we pray together, we cry together. And those, like, access to those sorts of coping strategies are just not there because we can't gather. So I think that's what's really unique and really hard about that, is just kind of our sense of safety. And then again, I just think the division is very hard, even within families. I'm guessing all of you have family members that feel a certain way about a certain political candidate and really feel a strong way about another one, or feel one way about wearing masks or not wearing masks. And I think for a lot of people, you might feel paralyzed in, like, will I offend someone? What do I even believe? And just how do I even, like, wrap my mind around all of this? And I think what I'm seeing in my classes right now, I actually teach 7 classes because I'm a big advocate for teaching on campus, and a lot of people didn't want to teach on campus. So I'm teaching a super overload. And what I'm seeing in my students, I teach over 300 students this semester, is I think the effect of all of this is just this feeling, this lack of motivation, feeling helpless, and kind of checking out. It's a lot to process this all the time and to feel it, and to just kind of be in this state of unknown all the time. All of these feelings, we're left feeling all of these things. And I think if a lot of people around us are struggling, whether it's our parents or our roommates or our professors or classmates, that's contagious. So we almost catch what other people feel. And that's what makes it so difficult. So again, what I have done is I have really studied how people can be healthy, okay? And me personally, again, I'm a professor, I'm a mental health clinician. I'm also a mother of 3 little kids. So it's crucial for me to practice what I preach. So all of these things have not only impacted me personally in what I teach my clients and my students, but I also practice them myself. And they've been really helpful for me throughout the pandemic, and just, continuing to stay positive and continuing to thrive. And no matter what our external circumstances are, to have sort of this unshakable foundation. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I would recommend possibly getting a notebook, possibly putting down your phone, possibly kind of single tasking on this. I think it'll be most effective if you can kind of give yourself permission to really soak this in. I'm a big proponent of single tasking. So kind of give yourself permission to listen to this information and really reflect on it and apply it in your own life. So let's get into it. I'm so excited. I love this stuff. This is my favorite stuff to talk about. Okay, so a big detriment that we have is sometimes we ask ourselves really bad questions, and our brain hates ambiguity. So if you ask your brain a bad question, it's going to give you a bad answer. Like, our brain at the core is a survival mechanism. So what it does is it stores all of our memories, it stores our experiences, and then when we encounter a similar experience, it'll give us data, it'll give us a recall, it'll help us say, nope, that you were scared of that, you're threatened by that, that might look like a snake. It's a part of our brain that's called the amygdala, and it triggers a fight or flight response, okay? And we can trigger that by our own thoughts. And again, our brain is not designed to keep us happy, it's designed to keep us safe, okay? So if you ask yourself, what's gonna happen? Your brain will say, I don't know, what are we gonna do? It's gonna panic, and it doesn't like ambiguity. So sometimes if you say, what's gonna happen? It'll say, you're gonna drop out of your major. You're gonna end up homeless, you know, under the bridge. It's gonna give you ridiculous answers to questions. So I think a big part of the pandemic that a lot of people asked, like, do I have COVID? What am I gonna do? Why is this happening? When will this end? What did I do to deserve this? And again, if you ask bad questions, what did I do to deserve this? Your brain will be like, remember that one thing you did? Maybe that's God punishing you. It'll give you a bad answer. So one of my first strategy that I love is ask better questions, okay? And I think at the core of this seems obvious, right? But if you really think of any problem that you have, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's feeling overwhelmed, maybe it's crazy relatives. If you reframe your problem into a question, you're gonna get a whole different set of answers, okay? So I'm gonna give you a case study of a real life example of how this can literally change your outcome and change your life, okay? So there was a pilot in Vietnam named Jerry Coffey. So he's flying with 2 other pilots and they all get shot down. So they are captured and they are held prisoners of war. And he's in like a notoriously violent, gruesome, horrific prison camp. So again, it's Jerry and it's 2 other people, and this is a true story. He wrote a book about it that's called Beyond Survival. So he has a cell that's about 4 feet wide, 6 feet long. He has nothing to meet his basic needs except for a hole in the ground. He's routinely beaten and tortured and starved and isolated. And he ended up being there for 7 years, okay? So the fate of his 2 colleagues, one of them killed themselves in the cell. The other one got out and was institutionalized for the rest of their life. So they went clinically insane. So what made Jerry's outcome different is he asked better questions, okay? So he assessed his situation. He looked at this and he said, like, I'm gonna be here a while. I'm gonna be here a while. And the question that he asked himself is, how do I use this? How do I use this? So what he did is that he worked out, he physically stimulated his body. He talked to God all the time because he had no one else to talk to. And then what he also did that I think is so unique and amazing is that he actually went through every day of his life that he could remember. He went through it in his mind, and the goal of it was to think of a lesson that he could learn from it. So just to mentally stimulate his brain is that he walked through every single day of his life that he could remember and said, what can I learn from that? What can I learn from that? So after 7 years, he gets out and he said that he was the most spiritually, emotionally, and physically healthy that he had ever been in his life, and that he would not trade that experience for anything. So again, if you think about asking better questions, that can save your life, it can change your life, and the set of answers that you can get is going to give you a whole different trajectory. So an example of how I've used this, because I heard this story and I've heard this strategy, and it started to become a lens that if I'm in a meeting, if I'm hearing someone vent, if I'm working with clients, I just say, what's what's your question? And, if I have play dates with other moms, like I'm a very self-helpy person. So I share this technique all the time because it helps in all of these different areas. So if you're overwhelmed, what can I do to cope? How can I be more compassionate to people? How do I see this from their perspective? So what I did when COVID hit, I said, how can I make this be the best experience that I've ever had? How do I grow stronger because of this? And then this is what I wrote on my whiteboard. How can I organize my schedule, my family schedule, so all of our needs are met? So I think even just COVID in general, what can you learn? How can you be better? How are you growing? How do you use this? How do you use it? That is going to give you a different set of answers. And again, if we think about the questions that we ask ourselves normally, it can be very self-deprecating. Like, what's wrong with you? One of my dad's favorite question is, what's wrong with people? Going on Facebook, you're going to say, why is everyone crazy? Why are they like this, right? So asking better questions. What do I do if I do feel these ways? What are ways I can cope? And I'm going to apply this strategy into the other ones that I give you. So I'm going to move on. All right. So another really big trigger for anxiety is that all of us have a set of expectations based on our experiences about how things should be, right? About how your significant other should be, how your roommate should be, how your teacher should be, how your classes should be, how choir should be, how the food in the cafeteria should be, how college life should be. That we have these expectations that really create suffering for us when they're not met. Like if you think about expectations about how other people should drive, you get road rage if Granny's going 20 under because you have expectations that people should at least go the speed limit. So a lot of times when our expectations aren't met, and this can be in small ways, this can be your significant other not asking you how your day was. This expectation was not met if they didn't do that. And then you get angry, you get resentful, you get passive aggressive, you get aggressive. Maybe you lash out or hold it in. And again, you suffer as a result of it. So I just think if your mental health and if your wellness and if your happiness is wrapped up in expectations about how others should act and how grannies should drive, you are setting yourself up for failure. So how many of you have expectations about yourself that you don't meet? Maybe about your productivity, about your grades, about your fitness goals. So a strategy for kind of this distress over unmet expectations is appreciation. Okay. So appreciation is something that's talked about a lot, but I want to dig into it more, and I'm going to tell you about some science behind it as well. So a quote that I have, it says, appreciate everything, even the ordinary, especially the ordinary. All right, so if you change your expectations into appreciation, this is where your life will change. That if you are angry that people are slackers, that your group members aren't holding their weight, that your professor doesn't email you back really in time, that's when you have this kind of rigid view of how things should be, and people will let you down because they have a whole different reality. They have their own stuff going on, right? And it's not going to happen. So changing your expectations into appreciation is going to reduce your suffering, increase your happiness, increase your joy, and increase your ability to just feel better. So I'm going to really dive into this because I think this is one of the most important strategies that we can have. And I'm not just going to say, get a gratitude journal and list it out and say you're grateful for stuff. Like, this is brain changing. All right. So neurobiologically, if your brain is filled with gratitude, it is neurobiologically impossible to feel anger, to feel anxiety, to feel anything else. There's no room for anything else in your brain if it's flooded with gratitude, okay? So if you just think about that is literally impossible to be anxious. You cannot be anxious and grateful at the same time, okay? Like, that is incredible. So what we've really found with gratitude is that it releases a chemical in your brain called dopamine. It's the same chemical that is released when you drink alcohol, when you snort cocaine, when you eat a cupcake. That it's a motivational chemical. It makes you want to repeat behaviors. So when you're grateful for something, when you express appreciation, when you think about in your mind things that you're grateful, when you look for it, your brain actually releases dopamine and you want to repeat it. So it becomes what they call a virtuous cycle, that if this becomes a neural pathway for you, you want to keep doing it. So what's really cool is they can study this now. Now we can go in people's brain and we can study outcomes related to gratitude. So there was one study where they had college students actually journal before bed, and they found that the students who kept gratitude journals as opposed to kind of benign journals had less racing thoughts. So it helped with their anxiety in that way. And then there was also a study done in PTSD, measuring PTSD in Vietnam War veterans. And they found that the higher the gratitude in these individuals, the lower their levels of PTSD. So that was statistically significant. So higher levels of gratitude it's protective against mental health disorders. So it's really, Brene Brown is a really famous kind of social scientist research. She does a lot of research with shame and vulnerability. And she says that the foundation of joy, the foundation of empathy is gratitude. And this is the groundwork for it. So if you're not feeling much joy these days, if you're feeling a lot of stress, that's another neurotransmitter that's released called cortisol in your brain. If your brain has a lot of cortisol, this can really be an antidote to that, literally. So a few things about gratitude. I do think that gratitude journals are great, but I think it has to be a little bit more visceral, that I really want you to think of, like, to go back in time and to think of a moment that you're really grateful for, and to really go back there and, like, what did you see? What did you smell? How did your heart feel? Like, physically, how did you feel in that time? And some people have this as their morning routine, where they have a gratitude practice in the morning to really flood their brain with those feelings. And it just it changes everything. So one way that I've made this a habit, I watched this TED Talk on habit stacking, and I was like, okay, what can I do to incorporate gratitude into my life? And as I was walking into campus, I'm like, well, I walk to campus every day. I take the same route and I see the same trees. And I just started to think about what I was grateful for. And it's like, it's become so automatic that now as I'm walking, and when I get to a certain point in my route, all of a sudden it, like, goes through my head like my gratitude script. So how that helps me is that when I walk into my office, I feel vital. I feel excited. I feel grounded. I feel inspired, instead of like, oh my gosh, how many students have emailed me? What do I have to do? Crap, I teach in like 20 minutes and I'm not prepared. It's just more centering if it becomes a habit. And last thing about this, what's really effective is sharing it. So, and being really specific. So it's not just like, hey, roommate, thanks for being you. It's saying, hey, you know what? I really appreciate how you listen to me. Like, I appreciate how you never judge me with whatever I come up with, and you always make me feel really comfortable. Thank you for that. Or, you know what? You're really thoughtful. Like, I appreciate all these little gifts and these sweet gestures that you do for others. Thank you for that. So just making it as specific as possible and then sharing it. And I just think to share this with everyone, share it with your teachers, share it with your roommate, share it with your parents. And it doesn't have to be big things. Like, if you can look at a fall leaf and have your mind blown. And I think that's what kids are good for too, that they, like, see a train and it is the best thing, right? Like, it's like just this whole new lens of awe and wonder. And I feel like all of us have the capacity to cultivate that. And I just think, appreciate your youth and this life stage and these relationships. And even if it isn't what you expected, that it's not parties and activity and all of these things that you wish it could be. And I wish that too. But it's saying, what can you appreciate and how can you share that? And how can you be the one that lifts others up, especially during this time? Because I think it feels better now more than ever. And it's even, it's for your own body. Like if your brain goes, you go, right? Like if your liver goes, you go. And I think a lot of times when we're faced with tragedy and trauma, like if there's a death or if there's a diagnosis, like I think that really gives us this perspective of like, wow, life is so precious. There's been a lot of tragedy in our community with deaths and accidents and cancer diagnoses. Even, there's a mom in our Bible study whose child was just diagnosed with brain cancer. So it's just, we don't need to wait for tragedy to hit for us to appreciate what we have, and to appreciate our brains and our health and our livers, and our life, that we can start now. And I think if you can look for that instead of having a framework of everything that's stressful, your life will be changed. All right, let's do a gratitude visualization. So this is going to take 2 minutes. If you want to close your eyes, or if you want to lower your gaze and just put your phone down or stop writing or whatever else you're doing. And I just want you to take a moment to think of 3 things that others have given you, okay? So if it was a small kindness that someone did for you, if it was a gift that mattered, even if it was someone greeting you in a cheerful way, just something that makes every day a little bit better. Close your eyes. Take yourself back to the place and time of one of these acts and relive how it felt. The sights, the scents, and the sounds. Re-experience it with awe and experience these feelings in a deeper way. So just take a minute. Maybe it's, someone in the cafeteria who's really friendly. Maybe it is someone holding the door for you, or someone giving you a gift, or someone asking how you are. Maybe it's someone just listening to you. After this visualization, recognize that small things are happening for you. Don't overlook them or take them for granted. Take a moment to feel a sense of being cared for, thought of, and loved. This should boost your self-esteem and self-confidence. Last, know that just feeling great is not the end goal. Let this reflection lead you feeling like you want to reciprocate with love by giving back to those who have given to you, or by passing on the love and care to those who don't have it. So I think what's really cool about this too is that I think just think about community that you're grateful for, and kind things that people do without expecting anything else in return. I think a lot of times if we give a lot to someone and they don't reciprocate, that we can sometimes feel resentful. But think about the people who give you things. Maybe it's your parents, or maybe it's a staff or a teacher, of just people who have stepped up. And that just to kind of think about the community of generosity and gratitude, that it doesn't have to be this one-to-one reciprocation, that think of it a little bit more holistically. And I've thought about that, and I think that really helps, because it's not just I was nice to you, you're nice to me, or I always listen to people and they never listen to me. I get that with a lot of people. So just think about the ways that people have been kind and thoughtful towards you, and really soak those in. All right. Oh, this is another one of my favorites. Oh, this is so relevant, isn't it? Here's a big no. And I'm sorry, guys. Venting is just so satisfying, isn't it? But I'll tell you what the research says, okay? So a big, again, brain health, neurobiological bad thing is complaining, okay? So complaining is our go-to when we can't control something. We let it out. It's an outlet. We can connect with people through that. If you're like, oh, this class, the man, the government, voter fraud, the masks, like venting. This is a big one, complaining. We're exposed to a lot of this. And another thing to understand about human behavior is that we are wired to comply and to conform and to fit in. Like that's again kind of how we're wired. So if you are around people who are complaining, who are negative, who are, venting, even if you're like, no, it's fine, I'm positive, it'll be okay, it'll bring you down for sure, because it's contagious, literally. So the more you're exposed to it, the more negative you become. And remember, I talked about cortisol, the stress hormone. When you complain, your body releases that. And this shifts you into that fight or flight mode. Oh yeah, so there's some really interesting research on this as well. So there's this study done out of Stanford that they had two different groups of people, and one group was supposed to talk about, tell me a time you've been wronged or slighted. The other group is supposed to say, tell me about a time you've been bored. So the people, and then after they had these participants write this down, they asked for help with a simple task, okay? So the people who had this victim mentality, a time you've been wronged or slighted, they were 26% less likely to help the researchers with the task that they asked. They also, get this, they're more likely to leave garbage behind and to take the researchers' pens. So the conclusion of that is that when we have this victim mentality, that we've been wronged, that we've been slighted, that the world is screwing us over, we become more entitled, less generous, less grateful, and I guess we steal pens too. So that's just another risk factor. So the problem with it, again, is that it puts us in this victim mentality. It does not put us in problem solving. It does not put us in compassion and creativity and empathy and, long-term planning, all of these other prefrontal cortex functioning. So when we get into fight or flight mode, we survive. We're selfish. Okay. That's the root of it, is we become more selfish. It becomes about us. We leave behind our garbage. So here's how I balance this. Watch your exposure to complaining. Watch in conversations, in people venting, in people talking with you, in the news, in headlines, because it literally, there's another study done where it impaired the hippocampus. Like, it literally changed the structure of people's brains. Another interesting finding is that, especially for men, complaining is really unhealthy. It's been found to lower testosterone levels in men, especially if they're exposed to complaining that they can't fix and they can't solve. And that's actually linked to more aggressiveness and to more lashing out and irritability. So after I heard that, I'm like, man, like, I need to watch this. So this is something that I'm really, really conscientious about. And I want to say this because a lot of people are like, okay, but if it's okay to vent and that feels good and that's like genuine and authentic. So I think it's balancing it. Like, I think it's okay to be assertive with what's frustrating you and what you're passionate about and what you don't agree with. But I also think that if you are just ranting about the government and COVID and, all of the things, it's going to change your brain and it doesn't have a positive outcome. So here's the strategy for combating that, is guarding your mind. There's kind of a vintage self-help wellness expert named Jim Rohn, and he said, stand guard to the door of your mind. And that I also, this really struck me during COVID as well, because if you spend 10 minutes on any social media outlet, you're bound to be exposed to a lot of negativity and anger and division and hate, all of these really toxic emotions. So just being really intentional about who you're around, the content that you're ingesting, what you read, and just kind of what goes in your mind. Because if you think about it, like, think of how intentional you are about what goes in your body. Like, if you're drinking poison, you're going to get sick, right? If you're watching and hearing poison, you're going to get emotionally and mentally sick. And that is what is happening. that is the outcome that we're seeing in a lot of people, is that they're getting mentally sick because of all of these toxic conversation patterns. So I just think it's important to set boundaries, to change conversations, to set a time limit if someone is venting, to maybe ask them better questions, like, what do you need right now? It seems like you're really upset. Like, how can I help? And just to say, you know what, I can't talk right now. I have other things going on. And again, just the media you consume. So it's a balance of being assertive about what's going on for you, but not just kind of venting with no conclusion to it or no learning. And people are like, man, you're probably really annoying to work with if you're always positive and people are trying to like vent about everything. And I'm like, but guys, what can we learn? So I think it's important to validate the feelings of others, but to not go there too. So another strategy that's been really helpful is called the spot, stop, swap. So spotting a feeling or issue and just kind of noticing how, if you start to criticize or you start to complain or you start to compare, you start to notice these tendencies. So spot it, take a minute to assess it, and then swap it out. Like, we have the power to do that, to say, what can I be grateful for? Or how can I cope in a different way? Because this is making me really stressed. So just kind of being intentional with that. All right. So I think another really big trigger is just reacting to life as it comes. And I think a lot of us just sort of wake up, do our thing, check social media, zone out, watch Netflix, just kind of fly by the seat of our pants emotionally. And I think what that is creating is, if we're living in a stressful environment and we don't take the time to kind of check in, if we're more reactive to how we feel, I think a lot of times that can create a buildup of emotions. It can create, anxiety, and then feelings about your anxiety, about feeling anxiety about your anxiety, or guilt about your anger and resentment. And I think a lot of times we are really judgmental for how we feel, or we just want to avoid it, or we just distract ourselves. And it just kind of creates this really uncomfortable emotional landscape for us. So a really big strategy for this is just taking the time to check in with yourself. If it's just saying, how am I doing? What do I need right now? I feel stressed and I feel anxious and I feel hopeless. Like, okay, it's okay to feel all of those things. A lot of times with my clients, one of my biggest foundations in working with people's mental health is just to accept how you feel. It's okay to feel it. It's not wrong. You're not crazy. You're not bipolar. You're not oversensitive. You don't need to be embarrassed for how you feel. It's how you feel, and it's okay. And I think a lot of times we have very low tolerance for feeling negative feelings. We just want to make it go away. So if we smoke pot or drink or eat or shop or watch TikTok videos for like 4 hours straight, all of those things kind of distract ourselves from how we feel. And it's not necessarily sustainable. So a lot of times if we just kind of be still and check in and name our feelings and accept them without judgment, I think this is a really big chunk of eliminating suffering. The other thing that's really cool that we have the power to do is to change your state. So if you're anxious, your body communicates that, right? Your breathing becomes more shallow. Your blood pressure increases. Your heart beats faster. Maybe you have different types of ways to hold your hands or hold your body or hold your face, or focuses that contribute to that. So this is a very important skill, is the power to change your state, right? And we do this all the time, and maybe we're just not intentional that that's what we're doing, but we can do this with music. We can do this with how we open our heart. We can do this with how we hold our face. We can do this with how we hold our body. This is going to make you feel really amped up. This is going to make you feel proud. And we can do that. We can change how we feel based on all of these different physical skills and physical intentions. So, we can change this literally within seconds. Yeah, and I'm sure all of you do this in ways. Maybe you listen to music. Maybe it's like classical music or pump up music or jazz music, like whatever state you're desiring. I bet your playlist fits. I bet you all have playlists that fit your vibe that you're wanting. So I think that's just a really important skill to have, and to have people who can help you with that, maybe people who consistently like make you really goofy and make you laugh and that you just feel good about being around. I think that's a really powerful thing. So the other thing too is just we can handle discomfort better if we associate it with a higher meaning, okay? So if you think about the sensation of being hungry, if someone's starving and because they don't have enough money to buy food, that's one experience of hunger. But if someone is on a hunger strike for a cause that they believe in, that's the same experience of hunger, but it's a way less emotionally stressful experience of it. So if you can associate your emotions with something like, okay, I'm anxious because I care a lot, because my schoolwork matters to me, because I want to become a counselor and help a lot of people. Okay, so this is actually like, how can I use this anxiety to motivate me and to give me drive and to give me hunger and to make me better? So it's like, yeah, this is hard right now, but I know this is for a higher purpose, maybe even greater than myself. And that will help you tolerate it in a much different way. All right, so this is another strategy, and I think this is kind of like classic self-helpy, but I think this is really important. And this is maybe the best takeaway that you can get from this whole presentation. When you wake up in the morning, do not look at your phone first thing. Don't do it. Okay? Let that just soak in. When you wake up in the morning, I want you to have some time to do something positive that fills up your cup in like 10 seconds, okay? So I want you to sit up and I want you to take a deep breath, or I want you to stretch, or I want you to look at a picture of someone that you love, or a quote that you're inspired by, or a really nice smelling candle, or a piece of artwork. Anything but your phone. Please don't look at your phone first thing. And that's what most people do. They say like 85% of people, the first thing they do is roll over and look at their phone, and then it's like you're bombarded. I heard on a podcast, they said that looking at your phone first thing is like opening your door and having 100 people come in and ask you questions and talk to you and share their feelings and thoughts in your bedroom, like while you're still in bed. So if you start your day like that, you're literally starting at a deficit. And this is something that I had to be really intentional about, especially I get so many emails. I get dozens and dozens of emails a day. And if I like check it when I'm not in a space to respond and to take care of it, it really caused anxiety for me. So this is something that I've been really intentional about, is to take time in your morning to have a cup of coffee, to check in with yourself. If you do a devotion or if you meditate, even if you just say like, what do I want today to look like? How can I be more grateful? How can I serve someone else? How can I just be really curious about other people's experience? How can I be more present in the moment? How can I better myself in a unique way? Like, how can I do something spontaneous? Whatever it is, I want you to be intentional about how you prime yourself. If you think about an athlete, they don't just sort of show up on the basketball court and be like, well, hope this goes well. Like, I'm guessing they have routine and ritual and songs and statements and thought patterns and visualizations. Like, use that psychology for your day, like for your life. All of these things add up for you to become happy and productive and vital and give you a greater capacity to serve others and to be effective. If you wake up, you roll out of bed, you maybe shower, maybe brush your teeth, maybe eat breakfast, maybe log on to class and just sort of stare at your phone and look at TikTok again, those habits are going to catch up with you. So I think if you feel out of control, if you feel like you're like everything is spinning around you, this is a way that you can take matters into your own hands and make your bed, like start with these habits that communicate control and organization and order and success. And I think these are ways to start small. And I'm a firm believer of this. All right, so I'm kind of just getting into strategies. This is another one that is kind of our highest purpose. And I think that this has been really cool through the pandemic as well, is just finding ways to serve. Again, if cortisol is flowing through our brains, remember the fight or flight stress hormone, that shunts everything off but fight or flight and survive. And that is going to make us hoard and close in and shut down and feel really panicky, fight, flight, or freeze. So service gets us out of that. Service releases a chemical in our brain that's called oxytocin, and it's so beautiful. That's like the connection. It's called the cuddle hormone, but this is released when we do something kind for others, even if we see someone do something kind for someone else, right? Like if you go on BuzzFeed and it's like faith in humanity restored, even if we see someone else do something kind, that feels really good to us because God put that chemical in our brain to help us thrive as a community, that it feels good when we help others. So this is something that I have taken really seriously, and it's really created a lot of joy for me personally, is thinking, how can I serve? Who can I serve? How can I help others through this? And that just fills up our cup so much. So I really like have my kids do this too. So we like write people mail, and we had this phase where we used to like make donuts. I don't know why. They were super good, very unhealthy, but we would make like fresh donuts and like deliver warm donuts to our friends and family. So it's just things like that. Like it feels good to do. It brings joy to other people. It gets us out of ourselves, right? Like a lot of times our suffering has to do with the things that we're not getting, the things happening to us that we can't control, the feelings that aren't pleasant that we experience. And this is another really good anecdote, just like gratitude. So I love, and it's not a transaction. This isn't like, hey, I was nice to you, so, what are you going to give me? And I love this quote that says, plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. I think that's just so beautiful, is that what are ways that you can make the world better without expecting anything in return? And if you really look for them, they're there. So I really do this with my students as well. I'm the student advisor for a group that's called the Student Association for Drug Education. So we're like, how do we serve people who are struggling with addiction? Like, what do they need if they're in a treatment center away from their families? And one answer that we found that's really beautiful is there's a treatment center outside of Mankato where kids live there while their moms are in treatment. So we're communicating with them, we're working with them. We're either going to do little gift baskets, or we're going to host like a party for them. Like just plan this really fun event that they can have this joyful experience when they are, living in this institution essentially, while their moms are getting help for their addiction. So, serving kids whose moms struggle with addiction is a really, really satisfying answer to this. And I'm excited and honored to be able to move forward with that. So another kind of, in finding our purpose, there's also this advice to serve the pain that you know the best. So if it's, someone who lost a parent, or who lost a sibling, or who has a sibling with a disability, or who struggles with mental health issues, or, who went through XYZ, whatever you've gone through that has been painful, a really great way to work through that is to serve others too. One of the ways that AA is so effective is the 12th step is to serve others, to sponsor people, and to give back, and to kind of dedicate your life to being a servant to people and helping them. So I think a really powerful way to heal pain is to serve it, and to serve that community. And just to think about that for yourself, and maybe that kind of informs your career choice, and or that it informs your volunteer opportunities, but to serve those whose pain you know the best. They also say like who you have compassion for. And for me, that's always been kids with addiction, kids whose parents struggle with addiction. Just coming from some really poignant professional experiences of, you know, these little people who have have struggled through things that they couldn't control in really big ways. So that's kind of how I frame my job at MSU in teaching counselors, is that I teach the counselors of those who are going to work with addicts. So if their clients can be really healthy and thrive and become better parents and get well, they can be better parents to their kids. So I take my job seriously, and I take all of these strategies really serious, because me being in a place to do my vocations matters a lot. And I think service is a big part of it. All right, so I know we're kind of running out of time, and I do want time for questions. So just in general, just take care of yourselves. This takes a really active decision. Remember the living in reactivity of like, what do you need to do to feel good? What are some barriers maybe? And what can you do? Like, how will you feel when you implement your plan? So keep it really simple. Maybe it is just making your bed, or drinking more water, or, you know, thinking like calling your grandma, you know, and just associate taking care of yourself with pleasure and with vitality, and with that it's necessary to do. Again, I know it's kind of easy to zone out and to distract yourself and to check out and to kind of just procrastinate and then feel guilty about it. But it takes an active decision, and it's okay. All right, so just kind of, if as you're taking care of yourself, all of these things are good things, right? Like be creative and have fun and be silly and goofy. Like you don't just have to be stressed and not do, like, avoid things and then feel guilty about it all day. And like, you don't have to feel guilty if you do take time for yourself. And I love this, that when your cup is full, let your peace and joy spill out to others in your life. The goal of taking care of yourself and incorporating all of those strategies is to grow so we can contribute and serve. And that's kind of our purpose. All right, so that is my contact. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have other questions, if you just want to connect with me in any way. I love Bethany. I'm an alum that just loves the institution. If you just want more information, and I know I'm going to share my PowerPoint if you want to view that as well. So I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. And if anyone has questions, we can, I can hang out for that. Otherwise, it's been an honor.